A lot of couples think they have a communication problem, but what they really have is a control problem. Because when there's conflict, something is controlling it. It might be emotions, it might be pride, it might be the need to be right or to be heard, but whatever is ruling in that moment is shaping what happens next. That's why the same arguments or misunderstandings can keep happening over and over again, because the same thing keeps controlling the situation. Welcome to part 4 of this 6-part series. What we're trying to do in these videos is help you move forward towards real transformation in your marriage. Well, this is not just about better conversations. It's not just managing conflict a little better, but it's actually allowing Christ to shape how you think, how you respond, and how you relate to each other in marriage, but not just for your marriage. Our hope is what God does in you would eventually share with another couple. This won't stop with you, but it will multiply. If you're jumping in here for the first time on video 4, we'd really encourage you to go back and start from the beginning. This is a 6-part series, and each week builds on the last with some encouragement to do some work in between. We put that link in the description and you can walk through the whole thing together. Because today we're stepping into something every marriage experiences and every relationship: conflict. What we're going to see is that conflict doesn't just test your marriage, it reveals what's controlling it.
So look at Colossians 3:15. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. The word rule there is really, really important. It is used to describe an umpire or a referee, someone who makes the call in a moment of tension. So what Paul is saying here is that in the middle of conflict, in the middle of a disagreement, something is going to have to make the call. Something is going to determine how to respond, what to say, what tone to take, and where that moment goes next. And most of the time, if we're really honest, it's not Christ. It's really how we feel, how we think life is fair, or what we want to say in the moment. Really, it's a reaction. And the reaction happens really, really fast. Before you've even slowed down to think, your tone shifts, your posture changes, your words just come out, and now the moment is being shaped by something other than Christ. But Paul is calling us to something totally different. Not just to believe in Christ, but to let him rule in real time. Not just in quiet moments, but intense ones as well. Not just when things are going great, but when things feel off, or there's frustration, or maybe even some hurt. Conflict doesn't create the problem. It reveals what's already ruling an individual's heart. And once you start to see that, you realize something huge, something important. You don't just have conflict, you have a pattern, which is really what we talked about in week 2. And most couples tend to fall into one of a few different ways of handling conflict.
Because we all have default patterns. Not something we sat down and chose, but something that we've developed over time. And the truth is, most couples don't fight randomly. They fight predictably. Here are 4 of the patterns that show up in a lot of marriages. As we walk through these, you'll probably recognize yourself in one or more, maybe all of them. One default is to punish. This is when conflict turns into an attack. It might sound like criticism, sarcasm, raising your voice. The goal isn't really to solve the issue, it's to make the other person feel it. I want to win, I want to prove my point, I even the score. Some choose the default of punish, others choose to withdraw. This one goes the opposite way. Instead of leaning in, you shut down. You might run away. You at least stop talking, you disengage, get super quiet. On the outside, it can look calm, but on the inside, things are still unresolved. A third default we might choose is to dominate. This is when control takes over. You push your perspective, you interrupt, you steer the conversation. There's a need to be right and to make sure your side is the one that wins. A fourth one could be to avoid. This one feels peaceful, but it's actually not. You ignore the issue, you move too quickly, you tell yourself it's not a big deal, but it's something that actually doesn't get dealt with, gets buried, and eventually explodes. Here's what's important to understand. All 4 of these are different, but they come from the same place. They're all ways of protecting ourselves, protecting our feelings, protecting our position, protecting our comfort. They might look different on the surface, but none of them are actually letting Christ control your marriage. Once I start to see the pattern that I'm following, if I honestly can evaluate, I can realize something. Those reactions might feel natural, but they're not leading you where you want to go.
Yeah, that's why even when the issue changes, the outcome really stays the same because the pattern hasn't changed. And that's where Colossians 3 shifts us, not just away from those patterns, but towards something completely different. Those default responses, whether it's punishing, withdraw, dominating, or avoiding, they might feel natural in the moment, but they aren't actually moving your marriage forward. They do three things. They really protect yourself, myself. They damage the connection you have with your spouse, and they really ignore Christ. And that's exactly why Paul gives us something totally different in Colossians 3. He doesn't just say, hey, try harder. He's giving us a new way to respond. Look at verse 13. It says, bear with one another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you. That phrase, as the Lord forgives you, really changes everything, because now forgiveness is not based on how they said it, what they said, when they said it, whether they said it the right way. It is based on what Christ has already done for you.
Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. Choosing not to hold this over you anymore. My identity is in Christ and I am His. He released me from the debt, so I'm releasing you of this debt. This changes everything. You don't forgive because they got it right. You forgive because Christ forgave you.
Look at what Paul says in verse 15. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. So now we're back to that word, rule. But this is where everything shifts. Because instead of reaching, you're now asking, what would it look like for Christ to make the call here? So instead of punishing, we choose to speak the truth with grace. Instead of withdrawing and hiding, we stay present. Instead of domineering, we listen first. Instead of avoiding a situation, you addressed it with peace. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Peace doesn't mean there's no conflict. It means that Christ is in control of how you walk through it, or how Jenni walked through it. And that means in the moment of tension, you actually have a choice. You don't have to follow your pattern. You can begin to build anew. So if our old patterns aren't working, which they don't, remember that Christ is calling us to something totally different. The question now becomes, what do we actually do in that moment of tension? Because this isn't just about understanding conflict. It's about responding totally different when it happens, and it will.
We all want peace, not conflict. So here's a simple pattern you can come back to in real time. Using the 4 letters of the word slow, we start with the word slow. S. Slow down. Pause before we respond. Not forever. Don't avoid the issue. Slow down your reaction. Sometimes you have to say it out loud. Hey, can we pause for a second? I want to respond right to you. Let Christ rule. My identity is in Him, so I want to reflect that. Ask yourself, what is controlling me right now? Is it frustration, pride, fear, the need to be right? Or am I actually letting Christ shape this moment? Taking this step is where awareness turns into a choice. Offer forgiveness. Forgive. Before you solve the issue, you can release the offense. Not because it didn't matter, but because you're choosing not to hold it against them. It can be a simple internal determination. I am not going to make you pay for this. W. Walk in peace. You're responding, now you speak, but you speak differently. Not to win, not to protect yourself, but to reflect Christ in how you say what you're gonna say. The truth still matters, the issue still matters, but your tone and your posture and your heart change.
So instead of reacting, you're learning to literally slow down. S, slow down. Don't let the moment control you. L, let Christ rule. Not your emotion, not your instinct, but Christ. Offer forgiveness. Release the offense before you try to solve the issue. And W, walk in peace. Now respond in a way that reflects Christ. And this doesn't mean you're going to get it right every time. There are still going to be moments where you fall back into the old patterns. But now you have something to come back to. And even one moment handled differently can start to change the direction of your marriage.
All right, so we want it to be super practical. Here's what you can do this week. When you feel tension rising, say out loud, let's pause. I don't want my reactions to control this situation. This one sentence can shift everything. This week, your goal is not to avoid conflict. Conflict is going to come. Your goal is to handle it differently when it does. Not perfectly, not all at once, but being intentional. When that moment of tension shows up, just remember to slow down. S, slow down. L, let Christ rule. O, offer forgiveness. W, walk in peace.
And maybe for you, the win this week isn't getting through the whole conversation situation perfectly. Maybe it's just catching yourself in the moment and pausing, or choosing not to say something you would normally say. These are all wins. Or choosing to stay engaged when you normally would pull away. This is where real change begins. So here's what we want you to do before you move on. Take a minute, talk together, talk about this. Which patterns do you tend to fall into? And what would it look like to respond differently this week? Be specific, because clarity leads to real change.
As you begin to practice this, you're not just improving your marriage. You're creating something that can actually help another couple one day.
And before you finish, do one more thing. Pick a time right now to watch week 5. Put it in the calendar. Don't leave it to chance. Look at your calendar. Pull out your phone. Choose a day. Choose a time. Commit to it, because what God is building in your marriage is totally worth it. That is the transforming power of the gospel. Healthy marriages don't just happen. They're formed one Christ-centered decision at a time. So we'll see you next week.